We are podcasting from the Diocese of Raleigh studios. Thank you for joining us on another edition of A Catholic Life. I'm your host, Billy Atwell. Today we have with us Father Leo Patalinghug. Some of you know him from Grace Before Meals or from recent video we put on our Facebook page of his recipe of the ugali and bean soup from Catholic Relief Services. So, Father, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, for those who aren't familiar with your ministry, talk a little bit about what you do and the kind of ministry you engage in.
Well, GraceBeforeMeals.com is really just an opportunity to organize what we as a Catholic Church believes about the Eucharist. But before there was the Eucharist, there was just food. And so what we do at Grace Before Meals is try to connect food and faith, and particularly to families. We try to bring families back around the dinner table because it's a lost art. We've bought into the fast food mentality. And Cardinal Dolan, when I was a seminarian, reminded us that God does not use a microwave. He uses a crock pot, which means I'm just trying to remind people of common sense. You want to strengthen your relationship? Take time. The easiest way to take time? Take a meal together. And it's really been a beautiful reminder of why God mandates a Sunday, a Sabbath day, where we as a family, a universal family, can come together and eat a sacred meal.
Why has that become a lost art? Like, what do you think is the reason that families have kind of fallen away from eating meals together, and what can we do to maybe bring that back?
Well, I think the devil is using the same tactics that he or she, I like to be inclusive when I talk about the devil. The devil is using the same tactics used against Adam and Eve to tempt people that they're God. So they work hard, but they're all working as if they don't need to depend on God's providence, that God will provide. And so people are taking 2 or 3 jobs, and believe me, I'm not diminishing the value of hard work, but if you are not working to strengthen your family, then you're kind of working for the wrong thing. You're building a castle on a foundation of sand. The second thing, I think the devil is still at work. The devil just makes extracurricular activities more important than the most important activity, and that's unity. So the devil is just real good at distracting us and making us think, taking time with my family is not important.
Why is food so important then? From a theological or spiritual standpoint, what is it about food that does bring people together?
Well, I think food, first of all, is something that man does not create. It's something that we have to receive, and we can work with it. And it's just interesting that all religions, including black magic religions, have food as the center that brings people together. I always tell people when I give conferences and when I'm doing cooking demonstrations that I'm going to give them a religious experience of my food. Not because I'm a great cook, because I'm okay. I'm good enough to beat Bobby Flay on the Food Network or something. But the word religion just simply means to be bound together. So when we talk about a religious experience for the family, what brings people together? Interesting, the one U.S. holiday that brings people together the most is Thanksgiving. And it's not even a spiritual religious holiday in the biblical sense. And they come together for what, dry turkey? No, they come together because they know the value of communion, of coming together. And food just becomes that vehicle. It's a means to an end.
And you've used that vehicle in your priestly ministry. Talk a little bit about kind of your background and why that became a natural go-to for you in your priestly ministry.
Well, it all started when I was in my mother's womb.
This is going to be a long story.
It is. Sit back, relax, folks. And it's true. God allowed my mother to share in a responsibility of being generous with herself so that she can feed her children. So being fed is something that has happened, that is part of us from the moment we were conceived in our mother's womb. And so as a Filipino-American family, hospitality has also been a really big part of who we are. And so we always had people over, and my mom taught me how to cook. And when I was in the seminary, I studied at the North American College in Rome. And that's in Italy, and you know how they are with their meals. They don't do fast food. A meal is 3 hours long. Just sit there, shut up, and the better the food, the less you talk because you can't talk with your mouth full.
At least you shouldn't.
You shouldn't, exactly. Or I want more. But it was just a real concretization of the power of food for me. And then when I was a young curate and a young priest, I'd go to families' homes because they would invite me for a meal, which was code word for I want to talk to a priest about something. And I would show up about 30, 40 minutes before the meal just to remind them that as a priest, you call me father, I need to be part of the feeding process. So I would help set the tables and I would help stir the pot. And I just became part of their family because that's what a priest is. And I think it really took off. Sorry to go through all this, but Billy, you asked, September the 11th, 2001. I was actually supposed to go to France a few days later, but all the flights were canceled for obvious reasons. And I remember having a few days off after a very difficult weekend, and it was my first year back in the United States as a priest. And there were a few priests, we went on a little retreat to recuperate, and they suggested this idea of a priest cooking show because we wanted to watch the Food Network. But the network had shut down and said, in light of the nation's tragedy, we just encourage people to eat together. So they walked in the kitchen and just watched me cook and said, you could do your own TV show. And I said, that's the stupidest idea I'd ever heard.
And here you are.
And here I am. God's got a sense of humor.
Very good. In your book, Epic Food Fight, A Bite-Sized History of Salvation, you make the connection between food and faith. And like you had said a second ago, food is a common thread amongst many, many cultures. But what is that connection between food and the Christian faith?
I always like to remind folks that Jesus became food in the Eucharist for a reason. And the whole idea of calling Jesus a shepherd, it's because we're the flock. What does the shepherd do? Feed us. He's also known as the fisherman. And what does he do? He provides food for us. And if you were to go into the book, you'll see a beautiful theology. We have all, as children of Adam and Eve, taken a bite of the forbidden fruit. The only thing that's going to correct this diet is one bite of the blessed fruit that hangs from the tree of life. And while Jesus certainly wants to feed us, so does the devil. And that's, again, the big fight. It's the epic food fight. God wants to get us to heaven where there is an eternal banquet, and the main feast is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world.
That imagery is it's interesting and almost staggering because you had said that in a YouTube video I saw that you did with Franciscan Media, and I encourage anyone to go and find those videos that they did because you made that point that God wants to feed us, but so does the devil. What do you see as kind of key in people's everyday life to help, make sure that their diet is on track rather than reaching for fast food, to make sure that their spiritual diet is on track so that they are gravitated toward, obviously, God and Christ, but that same diet that'll push them away from, what would hopefully be an allergic reaction to anything that's from the devil?
Well, let's just say that diets are really not helpful. Ultimately, it really is just an awareness of what we're putting into our system. And there's a passage, obviously, from Christ where he says, and you'll be able to drink poison and nothing bad will happen to you. I don't recommend it. But he's basically saying that we are living in this world and we are unfortunately soaking up a lot of bad things. Just look at our media. You can't watch the news without something negative entering into the back of our minds and feeding our minds, and even feeding our hearts and souls. So what I think needs to happen is to just be not only attentive, but to be proactive in feeding ourselves with good things. And let's just admit it, sometimes healthy food doesn't taste very good. And healthy spiritual food is not going to always be pleasant on our tongues. It's discipline. So to live a disciplined Christian life means that we don't eat junk food. A little bit here and there is kind of unavoidable. I mean, it's like a potato chip. You eat one, you're going to eat the bag. That's all there is to it. But we can develop an appetite. I mean, I think you're the same way, Billy. When I was growing up, I didn't necessarily want to be a priest, and you necessarily didn't want to be the uber Christian that you are, but maybe you were. But it took me a while. I had to develop an appreciation for the higher spiritual foods that the church is offering. And I think what we have to do is teach our children to have mature palates, because spiritually, we're stuck on gummy bears and processed foods.
You're right. That is a lot of what we're getting from culture. I also think that's the, is it, for lack of a better term, salvation for the church, or what's going to make it so appealing to people in a culture and climate like we've got, is that when all that is out there is fast food, a decent meal is going to look really appealing to people who are struggling, people who are, again, making some of these parallels. Someone who's got, struggling with diabetes is going to see a lot more value in fresh fruits and vegetables than a candy bar when they're struggling and suffering from the very thing that they're consuming.
Which is why we as a church have a responsibility to plate the Christian message well. And that's where, if I can offer critique, because that's the only way we're going to improve, our service of the gospel message really needs work. We need to be able to present the Christian message in a way that doesn't look like overwhelming leftovers or just trying to force feed people with the truth when, frankly, they can't handle the truth. They just can't. They're stuck on a younger diet, and we almost have to bite size, make it more digestible for them. So I really try to work on presentation, which is why Grace Before Meals really involves techniques of the entertainment industry. We want people to have fun. And I think if there's a critique people offer to me, it's like, you guys just sound like you have too much fun. Well, folks, our Catholic Church has more feast days than fast days. We're not just, we're not sourpusses.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is remind people, celebrate. That's what we do. We put celebration on the map as the Catholic Church.
I remember a priest, making the joke that, what was the last time you felt that the Mass was a celebration rather than just a hosted event? Do you go there with joy? Do you go there realizing this is a feast, that Christ has provided this for us, and we should be celebrating that? But
sure.
I think too often we kind of go in there ready to check the box that, yes, we went to Mass on Sunday, or hey, we even got an extra one in during the week maybe, but we don't feel like we went there to truly celebrate with God.
And, it could be their fault because they're just unengaged, and I get it. But whose fault is it also? Priests who are not giving inspiring homilies, music ministers who are doing poor job and really trying to make music beautiful. Churches need to be clean. I mean, would you go to a restaurant where the service is bad and the food is horrible and it's dirty? No. So let's use the techniques that make the food world successful. Let's plate our message well. Let's give them something substantial. And let's serve them really well. Because guess what? That's what we're supposed to do.
In that book, Epic Food Fight, actually, before I get that, how did you get the name Epic Food Fight? Where did you come up with that idea?
Well, it really started with just my meditation of Adam and Eve. And God, he said, you can eat anything you want. Anything. And the devil said, you don't need to listen to him. And so I just think of a big food fight between heaven and hell, and it's up to us to choose which food we will eat. And there is a battle out there, no doubt. And I think also about how people are constantly bombarded with messages, and it's up to them to discern, what am I going to allow to feed my mind, my heart, and my soul?
So in that book, you make the point that before the Eucharist, all we had was food. Talk a little bit about that point.
Well, it's just true. All we had was food, and it was, you can hear it. The only reason why the Jewish people grumbled so much in the desert was because they didn't have anything to eat. What kept them going was that God offered them an opportunity to enter a land flowing with milk and honey. Every covenant they had was always in commemoration of a agricultural season. The first fruits of things were to be offered. Covenants themselves were made by participating in the sacrifice, the feasting of it all. So the one thing that the Jewish people that always had on their mind was, am I going to be able to feed myself and my family? And God has been saying from day one, from the book of Genesis, I will feed you. Trust me. And just to prove it, he will send to us a shepherd.
That's very interesting. I love how you put this all into perspective. As we go through life, we will hunger for things that are not good for us. We'll want something that we know is bad for us. We know that we shouldn't have it.
Sure.
One question, is that natural?
Absolutely, it's natural. But it's a part of our broken nature.
Yeah.
So that's why we have to become disciples. We have to be disciplined in what we put into our system. And I do think that if I can also offer another critique, I'm not the healthiest guy in the world. I'm not certainly the healthiest priest, but I just think even our priesthood needs to be healthier. I think our religion needs to be healthier. We have to show to the world that we are integrated, body, mind, and soul. Our Catholic Church could lead the way to a true holy and holistic lifestyle.
You recently were on a trip with the Holy Father in the Philippines. Talk a little bit about what you did on that trip. You filmed some episodes of Grace Before Meals. Talk about that experience.
Well, actually, Grace Before Meals is just the name of the movement, and that's kind of how I'm being known as. But the TV show itself is called Savoring Our Faith. You see the food reference there? Yes. And that's on EWTN. And so when I heard the Holy Father was going to the Philippines, EWTN and myself, because I host my own show there, we kind of collaborated and offered just people to see a Filipino-American experience of what this Holy Father is going to be doing. So I did some news nightly segments, but I also filmed 3 episodes of my own show there, and it was busy because this new season is one show will have a segment on a church, a restaurant, and then we go into a kitchen and we cook a meal to help you remember the church and the restaurant. So it's just me showing how the Catholic Church is involved in the world. That's what I do. And the one way that we can show that is by feeding the world.
What is one memory from that trip that you take away and you say, I will not forget that? That was unique.
Oh, gosh. It's so many, but I think just watching the Holy Father, when he left the first Mass at the National Cathedral in Manila, he broke from itinerary and went across the street to a shelter dedicated to street children. Many of them would be prostitutes if they weren't saved by this Catholic agency. And he just acted like a grandpa. In fact, many of the Filipinos who have such a great devotion to the papacy in general, but this man's personality rings very clear because Filipinos are migrant workers, and Pope Francis came from a migrant working family. There were big signs that said, "We love you, Lolo Kiko," which means in the Philippines, Grandpa Francisco. It was really beautiful to see him play with kids, to see him just pinch cheeks and had them sit on his lap while they were doing a little song number for him, Just to see his humanity is beautiful.
And he's the one, he's living up to his own standard when he said, fathers need to waste time with their children. So by breaking from itinerary, the Holy Father's itinerary, I'm sure, is very strict and regimented, to make good use of the time. But to break from that and waste some time with his children,
and
I think is key.
I think, for what I'm trying to do. Billy, my work is to bring families back around the dinner table. And I just think that if a family would make a dinner the number one priority, they would agree with the statistics and the research. I work with CASA, the Center of Addictions and Substance Abuse at Columbia University, and the statistics are clear. If you want to reduce drug addiction, teen pregnancy, teen suicide, and improve your teenagers' SAT scores, the number one fact, now everyone's listening, right? Yeah. The number one factor in all of that is a regular family meal, because it is there that if you pray gracebeforemeals.com, you transform the dinner table into a desk where the greatest lessons in life are learned.
Father, thank you so much for joining me. So is gracebeforemeals.com that the best place for people to go and,
Absolutely.
And start dabbling in all the many things you have there? Also, I would encourage people to go to crsricebowl.org and check out the recipes. Father Leo has a featured video there where he did a recipe from Tanzania.
Every week during the Lenten season, we cook the recipes, and it's awesome.
The videos are very, very well done. They're very helpful, and they're very practical. You can make these recipes while you go. There's not, bizarre foods that you're never going to be able to find. They're all very, clear staples that you'll definitely want to sit down with your family and throughout Lent.
And tasty.
Yes.
And tasty.
Yeah. No, the ugali, that's why I mentioned it before, the ugali and bean soup. We're going to be making that one in my house because I emailed it to my wife. We have to do this. So I'd like to thank our producer, Mark Kite, for making this all possible. Don't Don't forget you can download this podcast and others, including Raleigh to Rome, our weekly news brief covering local and global Catholic news in 6 minutes or less, through the podcasting app on iTunes or through your preferred Android podcasting app. You can also sign up via email to get everything that we produce here in the studio sent directly to you with all the links you need to listen or to watch. And you can go to dioceseofraleigh.org and click on the email link in the footer to find that. You can check out dioceseofraleigh.org/RSS or dioceseofraleigh.org/videos to check out the latest of what we have to offer. And as always, may God continue to bless you and those that you love.